The faded Polaroid trembled in Emma Winter's weathered hands as she sat alone in her small trailer. 43 years in the film industry, always behind the scenes, always invisible. The photograph showed a younger Emma, script in hand, eyes alive with ambition, dreams she'd carefully packed away, one by one, like Christmas ornaments too fragile to display. Outside, the London film set buzzed with panic. The star had vanished without explanation. Jason Statham, gone. Only a handwritten note remained, on her makeup counter. Some dreams are worth fighting for, even the ones we've buried. The words blurred as tears welled in her eyes. Why would an A-list action star leave such a message? And why for her, a dying woman whom most actors wouldn't even notice? What could Jason Statham possibly know about the screenplay hidden in her drawer for 20 years? Before we jump back, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The persistent drone of an alarm clock pierced the quiet darkness of Emma Winter's modest flat in Croydon. Her hand, marked with age spots and subtle tremors, reached out to silence it. 5:15 a.m., the same time she'd awakened for over 4 decades in service to an industry that barely knew her name. Emma sat on the edge of her bed, waiting for the pain to subside. The doctors had given her 6 months, maybe 8 if the new treatments took hold. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. She hadn't told anyone on the set yet. What would be the point? Film productions waited for no one, especially not a 65-year-old production assistant who could be replaced before lunch. She shuffled to the bathroom, avoiding her reflection. The mirror had become an enemy lately, showing her not just the physical toll of illness but something worse. The resignation in her eyes. The quiet acceptance that this was all there would be. The kettle whistled as Emma organized her medications in a weekly pill container. Earl Grey with a splash of milk. Some routines provided comfort even as everything else changed. Her small kitchen table was cluttered with production schedules, call sheets, and her worn leather-bound notebook. The one constant companion throughout. Her career. Inside were observations, snippets of dialogue overheard across dozens of sets, and notes on the stories she would never tell. As she sipped her tea, Emma's gaze drifted to the bottom drawer of her writing desk. Inside lay a screenplay she'd completed 20 years ago. The Invisible Ones. A story about the unseen people who make the world function. She hadn't opened that drawer in years. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Zhao, the high-strung director of Retribution Fall, their current production starring Jason Statham. Emma, need you on set an hour early. Statham's makeup needs a complete redo after yesterday's disaster. No, please, no, thank you. Just another demand from a man, half her age, who'd never bothered to learn that makeup wasn't her department. Emma had been working in film since before Marcus was born, yet he still confused her role with every other support position held by a woman on set. Still, she replied with her usual, "Will do." Emma arrived at Pinewood Studios while dawn was still, just a suggestion on the horizon. The massive soundstage loomed against the gray English sky, a familiar sight after all these years. Her small blue Vauxhall, 15 years old and meticulously maintained, looked out of place amid the luxury vehicles in the reserved parking section. Walking through the back entrance, Emma nodded to the security guard. "Morning, Bill." "Morning, Em. Early again, I see." "Always." She managed a smile. Bill was one of the few who remembered her from the old days. They had both witnessed the industry transform, new technologies, new faces, new money, while they remained the same, the invisible infrastructure that kept everything running. Emma made her way to the production office, a converted trailer, now serving as the nerve center for the $80 million action thriller. Inside, harried production assistants, most in their 20s, scurried about with coffee cups and tablets. She slipped in quietly, checking the day's revised schedule pinned to the corkboard. "Emma," the sharp voice of Victoria Lang, the executive producer, cut through the morning chaos. "Thank God you're here. Marcus is having a meltdown over yesterday's footage. Can you—" "I'll sort it," Emma said, not needing to hear the rest. This was her value. Anticipating problems, quieting crises, making things work without recognition or fanfare. Victoria, a formidable woman in her 50s who had clawed her way to the top of the studio food chain, gave Emma a rare look of appreciation. "Don't know what we'd do without you, Em." The comment caught Emma off guard. In another life, she and Victoria might have been friends. Both survivors in an industry that discarded women after a certain age. But their paths had diverged decades ago when Victoria had pursued power while Emma had chosen stability, remaining behind the scenes. Emma made her way toward the star trailers, the morning sun now cresting over the studio lot. The pain in her side intensified, and she ducked behind an equipment truck to take another pill, washing it down with water from her thermos. "You all right there, love?" The gravelly voice startled her. She turned to find Ray Donovan, the veteran cinematographer, watching her with concern. His craggy face had seen as many productions as hers had. "Just fine, Ray. Bit of indigestion." He didn't look convinced, but didn't press the issue. Ray was old school that way, respecting boundaries, keeping confidences. They'd worked together on at least 15 films over the years, a silent partnership of consummate professionals. "Hear about Statham's tantrum yesterday?" Ray asked, falling into step beside her. "Marcus mentioned something about makeup issues." Ray snorted. "Wasn't makeup. Marcus wanted another 12 takes of the rooftop jump. Statham wasn't having it. Said the shot was perfect on take 3 and everything after was just Marcus being insecure about his first big-budget film." Emma allowed herself a small smile. She'd always appreciated Statham's no-nonsense approach. In an industry full of pretension, his straightforward manner was refreshing. Unlike many stars who'd ignore crew members completely, Statham had a reputation for treating everyone with the same brusque respect, regardless of their position. "Is he wrong?" Emma asked. "Course not. Marcus is scared shitless. Studio's breathing down his neck, but he'll never admit Statham was right." Ray adjusted the worn leather strap of his camera bag. "Anyway, I'd steer clear of both of them this morning if I were you." "No chance of that. I've been summoned." Ray gave her a sympathetic glance before heading toward the soundstage. "Good luck then." Emma continued toward the star trailers, her steps measured and deliberate. The lot was coming alive now. Crew members arriving, equipment being unloaded, the day's work beginning to take shape. This familiar rhythm had been the soundtrack of her life for so long that she sometimes forgot there were people who lived differently, who didn't measure their days in call times and shooting schedules. As she approached Jason Statham's trailer, she noticed something odd. Usually, by this time, there would be activity. His personal assistant, the makeup team, security. Today, the area was deserted. The small metal steps leading to his door looked untouched. No mud or morning dew disturbed. She hesitated, then climbed the steps and knocked softly. "Mr. Statham?" "It's Emma Winters from production." Silence. She knocked again, louder this time. "Mr. Statham." When no answer came, Emma tried the handle. The door swung open easily, revealing an empty trailer. The lights were off, but morning sunlight filtered through the blinds, illuminating the immaculate interior. Everything was in perfect order. Too perfect. No half-empty coffee cup, no script with dog-eared pages, no jacket thrown over a chair. The silence felt wrong. Emma stepped inside, glancing around. The small refrigerator hummed quietly, the only sound in the space. On the makeup counter lay a single folded piece of paper with her name written on it in bold, masculine handwriting. Emma picked it up with trembling fingers and unfolded it. Some dreams are worth fighting for, even the ones we've buried. Read the words twice, confusion washing over her. What did this mean? How did Jason Statham even know her name? let alone anything about her dreams. Emma sank into the leather chair, the note still in her hand. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Had she ever spoken to Statham about her screenplay? Had she mentioned her old ambitions to anyone who might have told him? The trailer door suddenly banged open, making her jump. Marcus Zhao stood framed in the doorway, his slender frame vibrating with barely contained anxiety. "Where is he?" The director's voice was tight, controlled, but Emma could hear the panic underneath. "Call time was 30 minutes ago." "I don't know," Emma said, holding up the note. "I found this." Marcus snatched it from her hand, his eyes scanning the words. "What the hell does this mean? Is this some kind of joke?" Before Emma could respond, Victoria Lang appeared behind Marcus, her expression shifting from irritation to concern as she took in the empty trailer. "His car service says he never called this morning," Victoria said. "Security confirms he left the set yesterday evening but hasn't returned." Marcus crumpled the note in his fist. "I can't believe this. We're already 3 days behind schedule, and we have the explosion sequence set up for today. Do you know how much it costs to have those special effects teams standing by?" "Marcus, focus," Victoria said sharply. "Our star is missing." "He's not missing," Marcus snapped. "He's being difficult, probably still sulking about yesterday." Emma watched the exchange silently, her thoughts elsewhere. The note had been meant for her specifically. "Why?" "Emma," Victoria turned to her, "call his agent, then his personal assistant. Let's see if anyone knows where he might have gone." Emma nodded, already reaching for her phone, but her mind was still fixed on those words. Some dreams are worth fighting for. Her dream had been filmmaking, directing, specifically. A dream she'd set aside when her daughter Sophia was born, when the demands of single motherhood had required stability rather than risk. How could Statham possibly know about that? The next few hours passed in a blur of phone calls and growing concern. Jason's agent hadn't heard from him. His personal assistant was equally baffled, having received only a text saying he needed a personal day. No elaboration. By noon, the studio executives had been notified, and the day's shooting had been reorganized to focus on scenes that didn't require Statham. Marcus paced the set like a caged animal, alternating between rage and despair. Emma sat in the production office, methodically working through her list of tasks despite the chaos swirling around her. She'd tucked Statham's note into her pocket, feeling strangely protective of it. "You've gone quiet," Ray observed, dropping into the chair beside her desk. "What's on your mind?" Emma hesitated, then pulled out the note, smoothing its crumpled surface before showing it to Ray. His eyes narrowed as he read it. "Huh? That's cryptic." "It was addressed to me specifically," Emma said. "Why would he leave me a message about dreams?" Ray studied her face for a long moment. "Maybe because you told him about your screenplay." Emma stared at him. "I never. Last month, the night shoot for the Thames sequence. You, me, and Statham were the last ones by the coffee truck. You mentioned something about having written a screenplay years ago." "I did?" Emma couldn't recall the conversation. "You did. Statham asked what it was about, and you said it was about the invisible people who make the world work. He seemed interested." Emma's memory stirred. The night had been cold, the shoot had run long, and they'd all been punchy with exhaustion. She vaguely remembered mentioning her old writing, though she'd hardly expected anyone to pay attention, let alone remember. "But that doesn't explain this," she said, tapping the note. "Or why he would disappear." Ray shrugged. "Jason's always been a bit of a mystery, hasn't he? Keeps to himself, does his own stunts, goes home. No drama, no socializing. Maybe there's more to him than we know." Before Emma could respond, her phone rang. Sophia, her daughter. Emma felt a wave of guilt. She hadn't told Sophia about the cancer diagnosis yet, wanting to spare her worry for as long as possible. "Hi, darling," Emma answered, trying to keep her voice light. "Mom, are you sitting down?" Sophia sounded breathless. "Yes, why?" "Jason Statham is at my flat." Emma felt the room tilt slightly. "What? Jason Statham, the actor. He's sitting in my living room right now, drinking tea and asking about your screenplay." Emma couldn't form words. Ray was watching her with concern, clearly noting her shocked expression. "Mom? Are you there?" "Yes, sorry," Emma managed. You say Jason Statham is at your flat? How does he even know where you live?" "He said he hired someone to find me. He wants to talk about your film, the one you wrote years ago. He says it's important." Emma's mind raced. The entire production was in an uproar over Statham's disappearance, and all the while he'd been tracking down her daughter? "Put him on the phone, please," Emma said, her voice steadier than she felt. There was a rustling sound, and then that familiar gravelly voice came through the line. "Emma, sorry for the cloak and dagger business, but I needed to move quickly." "Mr. Statham, there's an entire production looking for you. Marcus is beside himself." "Marcus will be fine," Statham said dismissively. "Listen, I need you to bring your screenplay to your daughter's flat. The original version, not any revised drafts you might have done." "But I know about your diagnosis, Emma." The words hit her like a physical blow. She turned away from Ray, lowering her voice. "How could you possibly know about that? Martha at the hospital reception desk is my cousin's wife. She recognized your name from when I mentioned the production. Doctor-patient confidentiality doesn't extend to receptionists, apparently." Emma closed her eyes, processing this bizarre turn of events. "Why are you doing this?" There was a pause, and when Statham spoke again, his voice had softened slightly. "Because I read your screenplay, the copy you keep in your desk drawer at the production office." "You went through my desk?" Emma was too shocked to be angry. "Yes, after you mentioned it that night by the Thames. And it's brilliant, Emma. It deserves to be made." Emma felt tears threatening and blinked them back hard. "Mr. Statham." "Jason. Jason, I don't understand what's happening here." "I'm making your film, Emma, before time runs out. But I need the original version, not the watered-down one in your office." Emma couldn't speak. The idea was so preposterous, so unexpected, that her mind refused to process it. "Emma, are you still there?" "Yes," she whispered. "Good. Get the screenplay and come to Sophia's flat. And don't tell anyone where you're going, especially not Marcus or Victoria. This needs to stay quiet for now." The line went dead before Emma could respond. She sat perfectly still, the phone still pressed to her ear, trying to make sense of what had just happened. "Em?" Ray's concerned voice broke through her thoughts. "Bad news?" She looked at him, still dazed. "No, not bad, just unexpected." Ray nodded, not pressing further. That was their way, respecting the unspoken boundaries that came with decades of working side by side without ever truly crossing into friendship. Emma stood, gathering her things. "I need to step out for a bit. Family matter." "Want me to cover for you with Marcus?" "Please, just say I'm checking with the location scouts about tomorrow." Ray nodded, and Emma felt a surge of gratitude for his quiet understanding. As she hurried toward the parking lot, her mind was already racing ahead to her flat, to the bottom drawer where her original screenplay had been gathering dust for 20 years, the version she'd written before she'd convinced herself to be practical, to tone down the emotion, to make it more commercial. For the first time in months, the constant pain in her side seemed distant, overshadowed by something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. The journey to Emma's flat passed in a blur of traffic lights and racing thoughts. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles whitened, physical evidence of the turmoil within. What could Jason Statham possibly want with her screenplay? And, more importantly, why now? As she navigated the familiar streets of Croydon, memories surfaced unbidden. The night she'd finished writing The Invisible Ones. The pride that had flooded her chest as she typed the final words. It had been the summer of 2000, and Sophia had just turned 10. Emma had written mostly at night after putting her daughter to bed, stealing hours from sleep to finally give form to the stories that had lived in her head for so long. She pulled into her assigned parking spot and sat for a moment, gathering her courage. Part of her, the practical, sensible part that had guided her life for decades, whispered that this was madness. Jason Statham was a Hollywood action star, not a patron of unknown screenwriters. There had to be some mistake, some misunderstanding, or worse, some cruel joke. But another voice, one she'd almost forgotten she possessed, urged her forward. What if? Emma's flat greeted her with its familiar silence. The modest two-bedroom space had been her home for nearly 30 years, its walls bearing witness to the quiet life she'd built for herself and Sophia. She headed straight for her small study, a converted box room barely large enough for her desk and bookshelf. The bottom drawer stuck slightly as it always did. She tugged it open, and there, beneath tax returns and old Christmas cards, lay a thick manila envelope, yellowed with age. Her hand trembled slightly as she withdrew it and slid out the screenplay inside. The Invisible Ones, by Emma Winters. The title page was slightly dog-eared, the paper grain different from modern sheets, a physical timestamp from another era. She flipped through the pages, marveling at her younger self's confidence in the words, the scenes, the dialogue. This version was raw, honest, full of the righteous anger and hope she'd felt as a young woman navigating a world determined to overlook her. She'd written it about film set workers, yes, but it was really about everyone who made the world function while remaining unseen. Cleaners, carers, service workers, the people society both depended upon and ignored. Emma carefully returned the screenplay to its envelope and tucked it into her bag. Whatever game Statham was playing, she would at least hear him out. The drive to Sophia's flat in Greenwich took nearly an hour in midday traffic. Emma used the time to call the production office, leaving a message that she was handling a personal emergency and would return as soon as possible. It wasn't exactly a lie. Sophia's building was a converted textile factory, all exposed brick and industrial windows, the kind of fashionably renovated space that her nurse's salary probably stretched to cover. Emma had always worried about Sophia's financial stability, had always slipped her extra money when she could, despite her daughter's protests. She parked on the street and took the lift to the 3rd floor, her heart pounding with each passing. Second. When Sophia opened the door, her expression was a mixture of concern and bewilderment. "Mom," she said, embracing Emma tightly. "What is happening? Why is Jason Statham asking about your screenplay? And why do you look so pale?" "It's a long story, darling," Emma said, stepping into the flat. "Where is he?" "Kitchen. Making more tea." As if Jason Statham making tea in my flat isn't the strangest thing that's ever happened. Emma smiled despite her nervousness. Sophia had always been like this, practical even in the face of the extraordinary. Perhaps that's why she'd become a nurse. Crisis and oddity were just Tuesday to her. The kitchen was at the far end of the open-plan living space. Jason Statham stood at the counter, his back to them, the sleeves of his simple black sweater pushed up as he poured hot water into a teapot. He looked smaller in person than he did on screen, though the powerful set of his shoulders was unmistakable. He turned as they entered, his expression inscrutable but his eyes keen and assessing. "Emma," he said with a nod. "You brought it." She patted her bag. "I did, though I still don't understand why you want it. Sit down." He gestured to the small kitchen table. "We've got a lot to discuss and not much time." Emma exchanged a glance with Sophia, who shrugged helplessly. They both sat, and Statham brought over 3 mugs of tea before joining them. "First," he began without preamble, "I wanted to say your screenplay is brilliant. Genuinely. I've read Thousands of scripts in my career, and yours has something most don't. Truth. Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks. Praise had always made her uncomfortable, especially about her writing, which felt so personal, so exposing. Thank you, she said quietly, but that doesn't explain why you're here, or why you've abandoned the production. Statham's face hardened slightly. I haven't abandoned anything. I've only shifted priorities. Meaning? He leaned forward, fixing Emma with an intense stare. I want to make your film. Now. With you directing. The words hung in the air between them so outlandish that Emma almost laughed. That's not possible. Why not? Because I'm not a director. I've never directed anything. But you wanted to. Once. Emma glanced at Sophia, whose eyes had widened in surprise. She'd never shared her old dreams with her daughter, not wanting to burden her with the weight of what might have been. That was a lifetime ago, Emma said softly. Not to me. I know talent when I see it, and your voice deserves to be heard. Statham tapped the table emphatically. I've put together a small crew. Ray's on board as DP. Ray. Emma felt a jolt of betrayal. Ray Donovan knows about this? He was the first person I called, Statham admitted. I needed to know if you had the chops, if you'd ever talked about directing. He said you used to shotlist scenes in your notebook, that you had a better eye than most directors he'd worked with. Emma sat back, stunned. She and Ray had never discussed such things directly. Had he really been paying attention all these years? This is insane, Sophia interjected, looking between them. Mum's never directed anything, and you want to just, what, make a film with her? Now? Statham's expression didn't change. Yes. Why? Emma asked, finding her voice again. Why would you risk your reputation, your career, on this? Something flashed across Statham's face then, a shadow of emotion quickly suppressed. My reasons are my own. But I have the resources, the connections, and frankly the clout to make this happen. A small budget, a skeleton crew, 2 weeks of shooting. 2 weeks? Emma shook her head in disbelief. That's impossible. Not if we're efficient, not if we strip it down to the essentials. He nodded toward her bag. Is that the original version? Emma nodded, still dazed. May I? He held out his hand. After a moment's hesitation, she passed him the envelope. He carefully extracted the screenplay and flipped to a specific page with the ease of someone who already knew what he was looking for. This monologue here, he tapped the page. This was cut from the version in your office drawer. Why? Emma looked at the passage he indicated, a passionate speech from the main character about invisibility and recognition. I thought it was too much. Too angry. It's the heart of the whole piece, Statham countered. Without it, the film loses its purpose. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I was trying to make it more commercial, Emma admitted, more likely to be produced. And instead, it sat in a drawer for 20 years. His voice wasn't accusatory, merely factual. This version, the original, this is the film we're making. Emma felt lightheaded, as if the world had suddenly tilted on its axis. Mr. Statham. Jason, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I can't just abandon the production. I have responsibilities. The production will survive without you for 2 weeks. And what about my health situation? She glanced at Sophia, who was watching her with sudden concern. What health situation? Sophia asked sharply. Statham had the grace to look slightly abashed. Perhaps I shouldn't have mentioned that. Emma closed her eyes briefly. This wasn't how she'd planned to tell her daughter, but then nothing about this day was going according to plan. I've been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, she said quietly. Stage 4. The color drained from Sophia's face. What? When? Why didn't you tell me? I only found out 3 weeks ago. I didn't want to worry you until I knew more about treatment options. Sophia reached for her mother's hand, gripping it tightly. And what are they saying? The doctors? Emma hesitated. 6 months. Maybe 8 with aggressive treatment. The room went silent. Even Statham looked down at his mug, giving them a moment of privacy in this most public of revelations. All the more reason to do this now, he finally said, his voice gentler than before. You have a story to tell, Emma. Don't let it die with you. The bluntness of his words was shocking, yet oddly comforting. Here was someone not tiptoeing around her diagnosis, not offering platitudes or forced optimism. I don't even know where we would shoot, Emma said, the practical concerns flooding in. Or who would act in it, or— I've secured a small studio space in Shoreditch, Statham interrupted. Danny Cole, my stunt double, has connections, and as for actors, he gestured to himself. I'll play the supporting role of Thomas. For the lead, I was thinking Olivia Colman. Olivia Colman, Emma repeated incredulously. She'd never agree to this. She already has, provisionally. She read your screenplay this morning and called it a revelation. Emma felt the room spin slightly. Olivia Colman had read her words? Had called them a revelation? This can't be real, she murmured. It's real, Statham assured her. But we need to move fast. Marcus and the studio will only stay in the dark for so long. You're risking a lot, Emma pointed out. They could sue you for breach of contract. Statham shrugged. Let them try. The publicity would be worse for them than for me. Why? Sophia asked suddenly. Why are you doing this for my mother? The question hung in the air, direct and unavoidable. Statham considered it for a long moment before answering. My father was a street trader in London. Worked every day of his life selling whatever he could to make ends meet. Had a novel in his drawer for 30 years. Never showed it to anyone except me. When he died, I tried to get it published. Every publisher said the same thing. It had potential, but it was too late. He was gone. Couldn't do rewrites. Couldn't promote it. He looked directly at Emma. Your screenplay deserves to exist in the world, and you deserve to see it made while you're still here. The simple honesty of his explanation struck Emma deeply. It wasn't pity that motivated him, but a kind of justice, a righting of wrongs that had nothing to do with her specifically and everything to do with what she represented. I don't know if I can do this, she whispered. You've been on film sets for 43 years, Statham countered. You know more about filmmaking than most directors working today. Knowing how films are made doesn't mean I can make one. Maybe not. But I'd rather take a chance on someone with vision and experience than another film school graduate who knows the technical aspects but has nothing to say. Emma looked at Sophia, seeking guidance. Her daughter's eyes were still wet with unshed tears from the news of her diagnosis, but there was determination there too. Do it, Mum, Sophia said firmly. If this is truly what you wanted once, then do it. I'll help however I can. You have responsibilities at the hospital, Emma protested weakly. I have holiday time saved up, and this is more important. Sophia squeezed her hand. You've spent your whole life making other people's dreams come true. It's your turn now. Emma felt something shift inside her. A wall crumbling, a door opening. For so long, she'd defined herself by her practicality, her reliability, her willingness to set aside her own ambitions for the greater good. The idea of putting herself first felt almost blasphemous. And yet, if we're going to do this, she said slowly, we need to do it properly. No cutting corners, no compromises on what matters. Statham's expression remained neutral, but she caught a flicker of triumph in his eyes. Agreed. And we tell Marcus and Victoria the truth. Not right away, but eventually. I won't just disappear. Fair enough. And I need to understand exactly what resources we have, what timeline we're working with, and who's involved. Statham reached for his phone. I can show you everything right now. Ray's already scouting locations based on your screenplay. Danny's pulling together equipment. Victoria Wakefield, she used to produce at Film 4, is handling the paperwork and permits. As he pulled up emails, budgets, and preliminary planning documents, the reality of what was happening began to sink in. This wasn't a daydream or a hypothetical. Jason Statham, one of the biggest action stars in the world, had assembled a team to make her film, with her as director. "There's one more thing," Statham said, his tone more hesitant now. "The press will find out eventually. A journalist named Liam Parker already caught wind that something's happening. He tracked me to a meeting with Ray yesterday." "What did you tell him?" Emma asked, alarm rising. "If the story broke before they were ready?" "Nothing yet, but I'm thinking we bring him in, let him document the process. Could be protection if the studio decides to play hardball." Emma considered this. Having a journalist around during her first directing experience felt intrusive, vulnerable. But Statham was right. They needed some form of insurance. Only if he agrees to hold the story until we're ready. Statham nodded, satisfied. "I'll set up a meeting." As they continued discussing logistics, Emma felt the surreal quality of the moment gradually give way to something more concrete. A plan taking shape, a future unfolding that she hadn't dared imagine. The pain in her side remained, a constant reminder of the clock ticking inside her body. But for the first time since her diagnosis, she felt something pushing back against that countdown. Purpose. When Statham stepped away to take a call, Sophia leaned close to her mother. "Are you really going to do this?" Emma looked down at her screenplay, at the words she'd written so long ago when possibilities had seemed endless and time had stretched before her like an open road. "Yes," she said, surprising herself with her certainty. "I think I am." "I pui." "Still angry you didn't tell me about the cancer," Sophia said, her voice thick with emotion. "But I'm proud of you for doing this." Emma smiled, feeling a curious lightness despite everything. "Darling, I'm terrified." "Good," Sophia replied. Dad always said the things most worth doing were usually the most frightening. The mention of Emma's late husband, Richard, brought a pang of bittersweet memory. He'd been gone 15 years now, but her daughter was right. He would have approved of this madness, might even have instigated it himself. Statham returned, his expression grave. "That was Ray. Marcus is asking questions about your absence, and someone from the studio called, wanting to know if I'm still attached to the project." "What did Ray tell them?" "Nothing specific, but we need to move fast." He fixed Emma with a steady gaze. "Are you in? Fully in?" Emma took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. This was it, the point of no return. She could return to the set, resume her position as the invisible facilitator of other people's visions, live out her remaining months in the comfort of the familiar. Or she could step into the unknown, claim the dream she'd abandoned decades ago, risk failure and disappointment, but also, possibly, create something that would outlast her. "I'm in," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. "Let's make a film." Dawn broke over East London as Emma stood outside the converted warehouse in Shoreditch that would serve as their production base. The industrial building, with its red brick exterior and large factory windows, seemed both imposing and full of possibility in the pale morning light. Artifact: Emma's director's notebook, a worn leather journal containing decades of observations, shot ideas and narrative concepts that Emma had quietly compiled throughout her career. Emma clutched her director's notebook to her chest, a talisman against the doubt threatening to overwhelm her. Inside were 40 years of notes, observations, and ideas she'd collected while working on other people's films, camera angles she would have chosen, dialogue adjustments she would have made, lighting setups she'd imagined. Never once had she expected to actually use them. Ready for this? Ray's gruff voice broke through her reverie as he approached, camera bag slung over his shoulder. His weathered face bore the shadowed evidence of too little sleep, but his eyes were bright with an excitement Emma hadn't seen in years. Remotely, Emma admitted, managing a small smile. But when has anyone ever been truly ready to direct their first film? Ray chuckled. Fair point. James Cameron probably shit himself on his first day, too. Thank you for that lovely image to start our day. The heavy metal door swung open, revealing Danny Cole, Jason Statham's longtime stunt double and now their impromptu production manager. His muscular frame and close-cropped hair gave him a striking resemblance to Statham from a distance, though up close his features were softer, more approachable. "Morning, boss," he said to Emma with an easy grin. "The team's inside setting up. Fancy a tour?" Emma nodded, trying to project a confidence she didn't feel. "Boss?" The word felt foreign, uncomfortable. For decades, she'd been the one taking orders, not giving them. Inside, the warehouse had been transformed overnight. What had once been a vast empty space now contained several rough-hewn sets, a modest apartment interior, an office space, a corner meant to double as a hospital corridor. Lighting rigs hung from exposed beams, and cables snaked across the concrete floor. A small area had been sectioned off as a makeshift production office where a young woman with bright blue hair was organizing papers. "That's Zoe," Danny explained, following Emma's gaze. "Production coordinator, used to work with me on The Fall. She's brilliant, if a bit chaotic." "And over there?" Emma nodded toward a gray-haired woman in her 60s who was arranging costumes on a rolling rack. "Margot Sinclair, costume designer. Retired 5 years ago but came back for this. Said any project crazy enough to put a first time. Director in charge at 65 deserved her support." Emma wasn't sure whether to feel flattered or terrified by that assessment. Before she could decide, Jason Statham emerged from behind one of the sets, deep in conversation with a striking black woman in her 50s whose elegant posture and thoughtful expression marked her as someone accustomed to being listened to. "Victoria Wakefield," Ray murmured. "Former film for producer. Left the industry after some disagreement with the higher-ups. Never got the full story." Statham spotted them and beckoned them over. "Emma, this is Victoria Wakefield. She's producing." "Ms. Winters," Victoria extended her hand. "Your screenplay is remarkable. I'm honored to help bring it to life." "Thank you," Emma said, shaking her hand firmly. "Though I'm still not entirely convinced this isn't an elaborate, practical joke." Victoria laughed, a warm, rich sound. "I assure you, it's quite real. Terrifying, yes, but real." "Emma!" A familiar voice called from across the warehouse. Emma turned, to see Sophia approaching carrying 2 takeaway coffee cups. "Thought you might need this." Emma accepted the coffee gratefully. "What are you doing here? I thought your shift started at noon." "Called in sick," Sophia said, not meeting her mother's eyes. "I'm not missing this." Before Emma could protest, the warehouse door opened again, and a slender young man with tousled dark hair and sharp, assessing eyes entered. He carried a messenger bag slung across his body and was already taking in the scene with obvious curiosity. "Ah." Statham's voice hardened slightly. "Parker's here." Liam Parker, the journalist. Emma had almost forgotten about that particular complication. He made his way toward them, his gaze landing on Emma with uncomfortable intensity. "Miss Winters," he said, extending his hand. "Liam Parker, The Guardian. I understand you're about to make history." "Hardly," Emma replied, shaking his hand briefly. "We're just making a small film." A production assistant with terminal cancer, directing an award-winning screenplay after 40 years in the shadows, backed by one of Hollywood's biggest action stars who's risking a multi-million-dollar lawsuit to make it happen. Parker raised an eyebrow. "I'd call that historic." Emma flinched at the blunt mention of her diagnosis. "We agreed you wouldn't publish anything until we were ready." "And I won't," Parker assured her, "but I will be documenting everything. If that makes you uncomfortable—" "It does," Emma admitted. "But I understand the necessity." Parker nodded, seeming to appreciate her candor. "I'll try to be unobtrusive." "Good luck with that," Statham muttered. A sharp clap drew everyone's attention to Victoria, who had moved to the center of the space. "All right, everyone, gather round." The small crew, perhaps 20 people in total, formed a loose circle around her. Emma was struck by how intimate this felt compared to the massive productions she was accustomed to, where crew meetings involved hundreds of people and multiple department heads. "For those who don't know me, I'm Victoria Wakefield, producer," Victoria began. "We have an extraordinary opportunity here, and an extraordinary challenge. 2 weeks to shoot a feature film with limited resources and under, shall we say, complicated circumstances." She glanced at Statham. "But we also have something most productions would kill for, a screenplay of exceptional quality and a team who believes in it completely." She gestured to Emma. "This is Emma Winters. She wrote the script and she'll be directing. Some of you may know her from other productions. Those who do know she's one of the most competent, resourceful professionals in the industry. Those who don't, you'll learn quickly." Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks at this unexpected praise. Victoria continued, "Emma, would you like to say a few words?" Suddenly, all eyes were on her. Emma clutched her notebook tighter, feeling utterly unprepared. Throughout her career, she'd been the person standing at the back of such gatherings, taking notes, not the one addressing the crew. She began, then paused, gathering her thoughts. "I want to thank you all for taking this risk. I know many of you have put other work on hold to be here. Some of you are working for reduced rates, or no rates at all." She took a deep breath. "I've spent 43 years watching other directors work, some brilliant, some mediocre. I've seen what works and what doesn't, both in storytelling and in managing a set." She looked around at the faces watching her, saw not skepticism but genuine interest. "This film, The Invisible Ones, is about people society overlooks. The cleaners, the assistants, the support staff who make everything function while receiving none of the glory. It's about being seen, truly seen, for the first time." Emma's voice grew stronger as she continued. "I can't promise this will be easy. I can't even promise it will be good. But I can promise that your contributions won't be invisible to me. Every idea, every effort, every solution you bring will be recognized and valued." A quiet settled over the group, a sense of purpose taking hold. Ray gave her a slight nod of approval, and Emma felt something shift inside her, a tentative acceptance of this new role. "Right," Victoria said after a moment. "Call time tomorrow is 6 a.m. Today, we finalize preparations. Department heads, I need you ready for a production meeting in 1 hour. Emma, let's go over the shot list and schedule." As the group dispersed, Emma felt a hand on her arm. Jason Statham stood beside her, his expression unreadable. "Not bad," he said quietly. "You didn't throw up or faint, which puts you ahead of several first-time directors I've worked with." "The day is young," Emma replied dryly. "Indeed it is," Statham agreed. "We should get you set up in the director's office. There's someone waiting to meet you there." Curious, Emma followed him to a small room that had been partitioned off at Tues, the far end of the warehouse. Inside, a woman stood with her back to the door, gazing out the window. When she turned, Emma felt her heart skip a beat. Olivia Colman, in the flesh, one of Britain's most celebrated actresses, looking at Emma with warm interest. "Emma," she said, moving forward with her hand extended. "I can't tell you how excited I am to work with you on this." Emma shook her hand, struggling to find words. "Miss Coleman, Olivia, please, Olivia, thank you for agreeing to this. I know it's highly irregular." Coleman smiled, her eyes crinkling. "Irregular is putting it mildly. But when Jason sent me your screenplay, I couldn't say no. The character of Margaret, she broke my heart, and then put it back together again. Margaret, the protagonist of Emma's screenplay. A woman who had spent her life being overlooked, who found her voice too late in life but used it with devastating effect. Emma had always thought of Margaret as a version of herself, the version who hadn't accepted invisibility, who had fought back. "I think we can make something special here," Coleman continued, "but I do have some questions about Margaret's journey, particularly in the third act." "Of course," Emma said, gesturing to the small table where her screenplay lay open. "I'd love to discuss it." As they sat together, poring over the pages and talking through the characters' motivations, Emma felt a different kind of nervousness overtake her. Not the paralyzing fear of inadequacy, but the exhilarating tension of creative collaboration. For the first time, her words were being treated not as idle scribblings but as a blueprint for something real. Meanwhile, across the warehouse, Liam Parker was deep in conversation with one of the lighting technicians, his notebook open. "So, you're saying Statham just called you out of the blue?" the journalist asked. "Pretty much," the technician replied. "Said he was making a small independent film and needed people who could work fast and keep quiet. Offered double my usual rate. And you didn't think it was strange that he was abandoning a major studio production to do this?" The technician shrugged. "Stars do weird shit all the time. At least this weird shit pays well." Parker made a note, his expression thoughtful. "Have you met Emma Winters before?" "Nah. Heard of her, though. Old school production assistant. Been around forever. My mate worked with her on that Bond film years back. Said she was the only reason they finished on schedule." "And what do you think about her directing?" The technician glanced toward where Emma and Coleman were deep in discussion. "Don't know yet, do I? But I'll tell you this. When she was giving that little speech earlier, people were listening. Really listening. That's not as common as you'd think." Parker nodded, jotting something down. "One last question. Does the name Marcus Zhao mean anything to you?" The technician frowned. "Isn't he the director of that big action film Statham's supposed to be shooting right now?" "Indeed he is," Parker confirmed. "And according to my sources, he's furious about Statham's disappearance. The studio's threatening legal action." "Shit," the technician said, suddenly looking uncomfortable. "Is that going to affect us?" Parker closed his notebook with a snap. "That, my friend, is the million-dollar question." Across town, in the executive offices of Universal Studios' London headquarters, that very question was being discussed in heated tones. 3 days. Marcus Zhao paced the conference room, his slender frame vibrating with barely contained rage. 3 days with no communication, and you're telling me we can't do anything? Victoria Lang, the studio executive, remained seated, her expression carefully controlled. "Not exactly. We can do plenty. We can sue him for breach of contract. We can put out a press release saying he's been fired. We can recast and reshoot his scenes. All of those actions would cost us millions and generate the kind of publicity that could sink the entire project." "So we just wait?" Marcus demanded. "While he does whatever the hell he's doing?" "For now, yes," Victoria confirmed. "My sources say he's working on some pet project. Something small. Let him get it out of his system." "And if he doesn't come back?" Victoria's smile was thin and cold. "Everyone comes back eventually, Marcus, especially when their paycheck depends on it." Back at the warehouse, Emma was experiencing her first real test as a director. The production meeting had begun, and with it came a barrage of questions she hadn't anticipated. "We've only got the hospital location for 6 hours on Thursday," Victoria informed her. "That means we need to shoot scenes 15, 22, and 37, all in one go. Can we consolidate them?" Emma flipped through her screenplay, mind racing. Scene 15 was Margaret's diagnosis, Scene 22 her follow-up appointment, and Scene 37 her collapse and admission. Each had a different emotional tone, different lighting requirements. "We could shoot them chronologically," she said slowly, "but use the same setup for 15 and 22 with just a costume change. For 37, We'd need to reset completely. Different lighting. More urgency. Ray nodded approvingly. I could pre-light 2 configurations, have the team ready to switch over quickly after the first 2 scenes are done. What about Margaret's appearance? Margot, the costume designer, interjected. In the script, she deteriorates physically between those scenes. We'll have to compress that, Emma decided. Olivia can show the progression through performance. We'll support it with subtle makeup changes. More pallor in scene 22, visible exhaustion in 37. The discussion continued, each department bringing challenges that required immediate solutions. Emma was surprised to find herself thinking clearly, decisively, drawing on her decades of experience watching others solve similar problems. When she didn't know an answer, she said so plainly and asked for input. The office set, she said, turning to Danny. We need it to feel both sterile and overwhelming. Margaret should look small within the frame, dwarfed by the corporate architecture. We can use forced perspective, Ray suggested. Build the desk slightly larger than normal, position the camera low. Exactly, Emma agreed. And for lighting, I'm thinking stark, overhead fluorescence. No softness, no warmth. As the meeting progressed, Emma noticed Liam Parker watching her, intently from the corner, scribbling in his notebook. What was he writing? How was he interpreting this fragile, nascent process? The thought made her uneasy, but she pushed it aside. There were too many immediate concerns to worry about potential press. By late afternoon, Emma's energy was flagging. The pain in her side had returned with a vengeance, and she found herself leaning against the wall during a lighting test, trying to mask her discomfort. You need a break. Sophia appeared at her side, concern etched on her face. And probably another pain pill. I'm fine, Emma insisted, though the pallor of her skin suggested otherwise. Mom, Sophia's voice dropped to a whisper, if you push too hard, you'll collapse before we even start shooting. That won't help anyone. Emma knew her daughter was right. With reluctance, she nodded. 15 minutes. But don't tell anyone it's... Because I'm tired. Say I'm reviewing the storyboards or something. Sophia guided her to the small office, closing the door behind them. Emma sank into a chair, exhaustion washing over her. She fumbled in her bag for her medication, hands shaking. Slightly. I should have told you sooner, she said quietly as Sophia helped her with the water. About the diagnosis. I'm sorry. Sophia's expression softened. I understand why you didn't. You've always protected me, sometimes too much. It's a mother's job. Maybe. But now it's my job to protect you too. Sophia knelt beside her chair. This film is important, Mom. I get that. But you're more important. Emma touched her daughter's cheek gently. This film is part of me now. The part that might survive. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of those words settling between them. Then a soft knock at the door broke the spell. Emma? Jason's voice. Got a minute? Sophia gave her mother a questioning look. Emma nodded, straightening in her chair and trying to compose herself. Come in, she called. Statham entered, closing the door behind him. If he noticed Emma's pallor or Sophia's protective stance, he gave no indication. We've got a problem, he said without preamble. Marcus knows something's up. He's been calling everyone connected to me, trying to figure out where I am and what I'm doing. Emma felt a flutter of anxiety. How much time do we have? No way to know. But we need to be prepared for interruptions. Legal threats, possibly. Can he shut us down? Sophia asked. Statham's expression was grim but determined. He can try. But once we've got footage in the can, it becomes much harder. Film exists, it wants to be completed. That's the nature of the beast. Emma considered this, her mind working through the implications. We need to prioritize, she said finally. Shoot the most essential scenes first, the heart of the story. If we have to abandon anything, it should be the connective tissue, not the emotional core. Statham nodded, impressed. Exactly what I was thinking. I've asked Victoria to revise the schedule. We'll start with Margaret's confrontation with the board, the scene that everything builds toward. That's one of the most complex scenes, Emma pointed out. Multiple actors, complicated blocking. True, but it's also the scene no one will want to lose if things go sideways. Statham met her gaze directly. We're making a film about visibility, Emma. Let's make sure the most powerful statement gets seen, whatever happens. As he left, Emma turned to Sophia, a new determination replacing her fatigue. I need to go over that scene again. Every angle, every line, every gesture. Are you sure you're up to it? Emma reached for her director's notebook, feeling the worn leather under her fingers. I've been preparing for this scene for 20 years, darling. I just didn't know it. As dusk fell, over London, the warehouse continued to buzz with activity. Sets were finalized, equipment tested, costumes adjusted. Through it all, Emma moved with growing confidence, her initial terror gradually giving way to a focused intensity. Tomorrow, they would begin filming. Tomorrow, the words that had lived only in her imagination would take a physical form. Tomorrow, Emma Winters, production assistant, single mother, invisible woman, would become something she had never dared to imagine. A director. In the gathering darkness outside, Liam Parker made a phone call. Hello, Mr. Zhao. It's Liam Parker from The Guardian. I believe I have information about Jason Statham's whereabouts that might interest you. Quiet on set. Victoria's commanding voice carried across the warehouse. Emma sat in the director's chair, a genuine surprise gift from Ray that morning, her hands gripping her notebook as she watched the scene unfold. 3 days into shooting, and each moment still felt like stepping off a cliff, terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. The boardroom set, though modest by Hollywood standards, had been transformed into a convincing corporate environment. Around a gleaming table sat 8 actors playing executives, all men except for one token woman placed strategically at the far end. At the head of the table stood Olivia Colman as Margaret, her posture suggesting both determination and vulnerability. Roll. Sound, Emma called, her voice steadier than it had been on the first day. Sound rolling, came the response. Roll camera. Rolling. Emma took a deep breath. Action. The transformation was instant and mesmerizing. Olivia's face hardened, decades of suppressed rage crystallizing in her eyes as she surveyed the board. Members. 27 years, she began, her voice deceptively soft. I've worked in this building for 27 years. I've ordered your lunches, arranged your travel, corrected your mistakes without taking credit. I've listened to your jokes about my age, my clothes, my invisibility. She moved around the table slowly, her eyes connecting with each board member in turn. I've drafted reports you've presented as your own. I've covered for your affairs, your drinking, your incompetence. I've watched you promote men half my age with a quarter of my experience. One of the board members, played by a veteran character actor, shifted uncomfortably. Margaret, if this is about the assistant manager position, this isn't about a position. Margaret cut him off, her voice rising slightly. This is about recognition. Not just for me, for all of us you don't see. Emma leaned forward, completely absorbed in the performance. This was the heart of her screenplay, the moment when the invisible became visible, when silence became voice. The new one. You know what happens when you don't see people, Margaret continued, reaching into her bag and withdrawing a thick folder. They see everything about you, every weakness, every secret, every vulnerability. She began placing documents before each board member. Your offshore accounts, Richard, your plagiarized university thesis, James, the sexual harassment complaints you buried, Charles. The tension in the room was palpable, both within the scene and on the set around it. Emma could feel the crew holding their breath as captivated as she was. I'm not here to threaten you, Margaret said, her voice softening again. "I'm here to show you what invisibility has cost you. When you fail to see people, you miss the talent, the insight, the humanity that could transform your business. You think you don't need us. The truth is, we're the only reason you've survived this long." She walked back to the head of the table, standing tall despite her character's 60-plus years. "I don't want your job, your money, or your power. I want something much simpler. I want you to see me, to see all of us, to understand that a company is not its executives or its shareholders. It's the people who pour their lives into it, day after day, without recognition or reward." Emma felt tears stinging her eyes as the scene reached its climax. This speech, these words she'd written alone in her flat so many years ago, were being given life by one of the finest actresses of her generation. Whatever happened next, this moment would exist. "Cut," she called, her voice thick with emotion. That was perfect. Olivia turned to her, a question in her eyes. "Are you sure? I can go again. Maybe with more anger in the middle section." Emma shook her head. The restraint is what makes it powerful. She's not breaking down. She's finally standing up. "You captured that beautifully." A small smile of appreciation crossed Olivia's face. "Your words make it easy." Ray approached from behind the camera. "We should get one more take from the side angle, Emma. Catch the reactions of the board members as she's speaking." "Good idea," Emma agreed. "Let's reset and go again." As the crew adjusted lights and positions, Emma became aware of a commotion near the warehouse entrance. Victoria was engaged in what appeared to be a heated argument with someone just outside. Emma's stomach tightened with apprehension. Jason Statham materialized at her side, his expression tense. "Marcus is here, with a lawyer." Emma's heart sank. "How did he find us?" "Three guesses," Statham muttered, his gaze shifting to where Liam Parker stood observing the confrontation by the door, his ever-present notebook in hand. "You think the journalist told him?" "I know he did. Question is why." "And what do we do?" "Now?" Emma considered their options. They had 4 days of footage already, not nearly enough for a complete film, but perhaps enough to prove the project's value. The boardroom scene they'd just shot was central to the story. At least they had. That. "Let them in," she decided. "We have nothing to hide." Statham looked surprised. "You sure about that? Marcus isn't known for his rational approach to conflict." "If we try to keep them out, it only confirms we're doing something wrong," Emma reasoned. "We're making a film about visibility. Let's be visible." After a moment's hesitation, Statham nodded and signaled to Victoria. The producer released a visible sigh, then stepped aside to allow Marcus Zhao and a severe-looking woman in a charcoal suit to enter. Marcus surveyed the set with undisguised contempt, his gaze hardening when it landed on Jason. "So, this is where you've been hiding, making some amateur art film while an £80 million production sits idle?" "Good to see you too, Marcus," Statham replied evenly. "This is Emma Winters, our director." Marcus barely glanced at Emma. "I know who she is. Production assistant on my set, until she decided to disappear along with my star." "Your star, is it?" Statham's tone remained calm, but Emma could sense his tension. "Funny. I don't recall seeing your name on my paycheck." The lawyer cleared her throat. "Mr. Statham, I'm Caroline Bennett, representing Universal Studios. You're in breach of contract, and we're prepared to take immediate legal action unless you return to the production of Retribution Fall without further delay." "On what grounds exactly?" Victoria Wakefield stepped forward, her extensive producing experience evident in her composed demeanor. "Mr. Statham's contract includes provisions for personal projects between primary shooting blocks. We've carefully scheduled this production to conclude before he's required back on set." Bennett's eyes narrowed. "His contract requires notification and approval for any concurrent projects which was not sought or granted. Actually, Victoria produced a document from her portfolio. Notification was provided via email to executive producer Victoria Lang 3 weeks ago. We have the receipt confirmation. No objection was registered within the stipulated 7-day window, which constitutes tacit approval under Clause 27B. Emma watched this exchange with a mixture of admiration and anxiety. She'd had no idea Victoria had been so thorough in establishing their legal position. Was it possible they might actually weather this confrontation? Marcus, clearly not expecting this line of defense, turned his attention to Emma. "And you," he said, his voice dripping with disdain, "a production assistant with no directing experience. What exactly qualifies you to lead a film?" Before Emma could respond, Olivia Colman stepped forward from the set, still in character costume but with unmistakable authority in her bearing. "I'd say 40-plus years in the industry. Observing directors both brilliant and mediocre provides rather more qualification than many first-timers get," she stated coolly. "Emma's direction these past few days has been more insightful, more nuanced, and frankly more respectful than much of what I've experienced from established directors." Marcus blinked, clearly thrown by Coleman's presence and support. "Ms. Coleman, I didn't realize you were involved in this project." "Clearly, there's a great deal you didn't realize," Olivia replied with a tight smile. "Now, we were in the middle of shooting a rather important scene. Perhaps your legal discussions could continue somewhere that isn't disrupting our work?" Caroline Bennett was already examining the document Victoria had provided, her expression suggesting it might indeed pose a problem for their case. "Mr. Zhao, we should confer privately before proceeding further." Marcus looked ready to object, but after a tense moment he gave a curt nod. "This isn't over," he said to Statham. "Not by a long shot." As they retreated to a corner of the warehouse, with Victoria, Emma released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "That was remarkable timing," she said to Olivia. The actress shrugged. "I've dealt with enough bullies in this industry to recognize the type. Besides, I meant every word." She glanced toward where Marcus and his lawyer were engaged in intense discussion. "Should we continue with the scene? Make good use of the time while they sort themselves out?" Emma hesitated, then nodded decisively. "Absolutely. Ray, are we ready for that side angle?" "All set," the cinematographer confirmed. "Excellent. Places everyone." Emma returned to her director's chair, determined not to let the interruption derail their momentum. "Sound rolling? Rolling. Camera rolling? Rolling. Action." As Olivia launched once more into Margaret's powerful speech, Emma noticed Liam, Parker observing from the sidelines, his expression unreadable. Their eyes met briefly, and Emma was surprised to see not triumph but something closer to regret in his gaze. Why had he revealed their location to Marcus? And why did he now seem troubled by the consequences? The question would have to wait. For now, Emma focused entirely on the scene unfolding before her, on capturing the truth at the heart of her story while they still had the chance. By late afternoon, the confrontation had evolved into an uneasy detente. Marcus and his lawyer had retreated but promised to return with a more comprehensive legal strategy. Victoria seemed confident they could hold them off long enough to complete principal photography, but the atmosphere on set had changed, an undercurrent of tension running beneath every interaction. During a break in filming, Emma slipped away to the small director's office, needing a moment alone to collect her thoughts and take another pain pill. The exertion and stress were taking their toll, making the ever-present pain in her side more difficult to ignore. A knock at the door interrupted her brief respite. "Come in," she called, quickly stowing her medication. To her surprise, it was Liam Parker who entered, his customary notebook absent for once. "Do you have a moment?" he asked, unusually hesitant. "That depends," Emma replied coolly. "Are you here as a journalist or as an informant for Marcus Zhao?" Parker winced. "I deserve that. But it's not quite what you think. You didn't tell him where to find us. I did, Parker admitted, but not for the reasons you might assume. He closed the door and leaned against it, suddenly looking younger and less assured. I've been an entertainment journalist for 7 years. Most of that time I've been writing puff pieces about celebrity relationships and set gossip. When I heard rumors about Statham abandoning a major production, I thought I'd finally found a story with teeth. Studio drama, contract disputes, star power. And instead, you found us, Emma said. A bunch of misfits making a small film about invisibility. Parker nodded. I found something authentic, something that mattered, and it scared the hell out of me. So you called Marcus. I called him because I need this story to have conflict, tension, obstacles to overcome. A straightforward, they made a nice little film together, doesn't sell papers or generate clicks. He met her eyes directly. But I also called him because you need him. Emma raised an eyebrow. We need Marcus Zhao. In what universe? You need an antagonist. Every great story has one, and every great film, especially one about underdogs and invisibility, needs to overcome real opposition to resonate. Emma considered this unexpected perspective. There was a certain twisted logic to it. So, you're manufacturing drama for both our benefits? I prefer to think of it as accelerating the inevitable, Parker replied. Marcus would have found out. Eventually. This way, it happens on your terms, while you have Olivia Colman on set defending you and with Victoria Wakefield's legal groundwork already in place. That's quite a rationalization for betrayal. Parker didn't flinch from the accusation. I'm a journalist. My first loyalty is to the story. But I believe your film is that story. Not Statham's contract dispute, not Marcus's tantrum. The real story is you, Emma Winters, making the film you should have made decades ago. Before Emma could respond, another wave of pain washed over her, sharp enough to make her gasp and clutch the edge of the desk. Parker's expression immediately shifted from earnest to concerned. Are you all right? Should I get Sophia? Emma shook her head, waiting for the spasm to pass. It's nothing. Just tired. It's not nothing, Parker said quietly. It's cancer. Stage 4, pancreatic. 6 to 8 months. Emma looked up sharply. How did you— I'm a journalist. I research. His voice softened. And I've watched both my parents die from cancer. I recognize the signs. An uncomfortable silence fell between them. Emma had become accustomed to hiding her condition, to putting on a brave face. Having it acknowledged so directly by a virtual stranger was both intrusive and oddly relieving. Does the crew know? Parker asked. Some suspect, I think. Sophia knows, of course, and Jason. The rest, it hasn't seemed relevant to the work. Parker considered this. It's the heart of the story, though, isn't it? Not just any production assistant directing her first film, but one racing against a very final deadline. I don't want this to be about my illness, Emma said firmly. The film stands on its own merits. Parker considered this, noting Emma's defiant tone and the resolute clarity in her eyes. He closed his notebook, slowly. Then help me tell the story right. Don't let it be about the illness. Make it about the film, the dream. I can do that if you let me. Emma nodded slowly, unsure whether to trust him entirely, but recognizing the potential power of the press when wielded ethically. Then you stay. But one wrong move, Parker, and I pull you out of this story faster than Jason can throw a punch. He grinned. Fair enough. The crew powered through their 4th day, driven by a strange blend of urgency and purpose. Olivia Colman's performance deepened with each take, and Emma, to her own surprise, was directing with authority, her instincts hard-earned over decades of observing others. But by day 5, something shifted. Emma awoke in Sophia's guest room, her side throbbing. She reached for her pills but hesitated. The dosage she'd been taking dulled the pain but clouded her mind, and she needed her full clarity on set. Gritting her teeth, she halved the dose. At the set, she noticed murmurs. Danny approached during a lighting setup. You should see this. He handed her a tablet. On screen, a leaked news headline. Statham abandons 80-minute film to fund secret project with terminally ill assistant director. Below it, a photo of Emma on set, arms raised mid-direction, face drawn but alight with passion. Olivia Colman was visible in the background. Emma's heart sank. Was this Parker? No, he's furious. This leak came from Zhao's camp. Emma turned to find Jason already dialing his phone. Victoria joined them a moment later, tense. The studio's going to hit hard, she said. They've already threatened injunctions. They think if they kill publicity, the project dies. Emma felt her resolve tighten. Then we fight fire. With fire, Jason looked at her. Meaning? Meaning we go public, on our terms. That evening, Parker and Olivia filmed an impromptu interview with Emma, raw and unfiltered. She sat in her director's chair, her hands in her lap. I didn't ask for this, she began, but I'm not turning it down. I've spent 40 years making other people's stories happen. This is the first time I'm telling my own. The video went live at midnight. By morning, it had 2.4 million views. Fans flooded in with support. Industry veterans commented. Your Make Emma's film began trending. Universal Studios released a sterile response, confirming they were reviewing contractual obligations. But it was too late. The public had chosen a side. Then came the real twist. A courier arrived on set that afternoon carrying a small, weathered envelope. Inside, a handwritten note. Emma opened it, frowning. Margaret's story is real. It was never fiction. She worked for me once. A.S. There was no return address, no other identifier. Just initials. A.S. Jason took the note and paled. No bloody way. Who's A.S.? Emma asked. Jason handed her his phone. On screen, a Wikipedia page for Agatha Sinclair, reclusive former CEO of a global tech conglomerate, now in her 80s. She vanished from the public eye a decade ago, Jason said. Rumors were she was ousted in a quiet board coup, but if Margaret was based on her, Emma's mind reeled. Could it be? Could her fictional character be based on a real woman, a silent whistleblower whose story had never seen the light of day? Suddenly, the film wasn't just personal. It was a veiled memoir. The stakes had doubled. Now, Emma wasn't just telling her story. She might be telling the buried truth of a powerful woman wronged by her own empire. And someone didn't want that story told. That night, the set was vandalized, spray-painted across the boardroom wall. Don't finish the film. Lights smashed, cables slashed, production halted. Ray and Danny worked overnight, salvaging what they could. Olivia stayed to help, sleeves rolled, jaw tight with fury. Emma sat in her chair, numb. Not from fear, but from realization. This wasn't about dreams anymore. It was about truth, and someone out there was scared of it. Morning came, gray and damp. Emma returned to the set to find a note taped to her chair. Truth hurts. You have until Friday to walk away. The crew gathered silently, their faces taut with unease. Victoria slammed her phone down after a call with the insurance broker. They won't cover sabotage, she said flatly. If we keep going, we do it fully at our own risk. We've already been doing that, Jason replied. Let's finish what we started. Emma stepped forward. Anyone who wants out, I understand. This is bigger than we expected, but I'm staying. No one moved. Not Olivia, not Ray, not Danny, not Parker, even Zoe, the disorganized but tenacious production coordinator, stood with arms crossed and chin up. We're with you, Ray said. To the end. Emma nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. Then we move fast. Shoot the emotional backbone. Everything else is gravy. Victoria clapped once. We do this like we mean it. Parker, now fully embedded, traced the thread backward. He uncovered something unexpected. A former Sinclair employee who had filed a whistleblower report in the early 2000s and disappeared a year later. Name: Helen Greaves. Occupation: executive assistant to Agatha Sinclair. Last known address: Brixton. He shared the discovery with Emma that night over a table scattered with script pages and tea mugs. She might still be alive, he said, or know something. Emma stared at the name. Greaves. That's who I modeled the friend character on. It was no longer coincidence. Somehow, the screenplay she'd thought she'd invented was echoing a hidden, dangerous truth. What if someone fed me this? She murmured. Back then, subconsciously, or as a dare to tell it without realizing what it was. Jason leaned in. Then the only way forward is to finish it. Tell the truth, whether it came from memory, muse, or mistake. The next day, production resumed under tighter security and heightened tension. But Emma didn't waver. She stepped onto the set, called Action, and watched her truth unfold one scene at a time. Dawn was breaking when Emma stood at the warehouse's back entrance, steaming thermos in hand. She wasn't watching the sky. She was watching the reflection in the dusty glass, the image of herself as a woman quietly about to do the most important thing in her life. Victoria joined her. The studio's regrouping. They won't let this go. I know. Emma took a sip. That's why today we shoot the speech. The team gathered around for the morning call. Olivia Colman's voice cut through the clamor. If we do nothing else, let's immortalize Margaret's reckoning. The production that day felt like trench warfare. Victoria juggled logistics and legal threats. Danny triple-secured every rig. Sophia quietly administered Emma's meds between setups. Even Parker stopped taking notes and started running errands, his observer role evolving into active loyalty. Inside the office set, everything was quiet. Scene 82. Margaret's televised statement. The final appeal. The moral and emotional climax. Emma called action. Olivia stepped forward. This is not about revenge, she said. It's about accountability. I've spent my life watching quiet people suffer so the loud could prosper. But I won't die without having said the truth out loud. The line hung in the air. On Olivia's cue, the camera pushed forward. Her gaze locked on the lens, implicating everyone watching. The crew was motionless. Emma whispered, "Cut." Silence. Then applause. Not raucous, but deeply felt. That evening, Emma sat alone. Her hands shook. The pain was worsening. The pills weren't working. And still she sketched blocking notes for tomorrow's scene in the hospice corridor. Jason knocked. 5 minutes? Of course. He sat. He didn't talk at first. Just watched her with the quiet of someone waiting for her to break the silence. I don't know if I'll make it to the end of this shoot, Emma said finally. Jason nodded. Then we shoot the ending next. Tomorrow. But the sets. Not, I'll call Ray. We'll rebuild the ending to fit what we can shoot now. Tomorrow, we finish it. Emma stared at him. Why are you doing this? Really? He didn't dodge. Because no one did it for my dad. Because I've watched too many stories die in drawers. Because you wrote something that changed me. The U. Next day, they shot the final scene. In the scene, Margaret walks through the empty offices she once worked in. She touches desks, hears the echoes. She takes her coat, leaves her ID badge, walks into sunlight. No triumphant music, just peace. Emma watched through the monitor, barely able to stay upright, but her eyes were steady. Cut, she whispered. It was done, and yet the storm hadn't passed. That evening, Victoria received a cease and desist order. Universal was suing for breach and defamation. An anonymous backer had pulled their emergency funding. Emma read the email with steady eyes. "They'll kill the film in post," Victoria said. "Freeze distribution, tie it up for years." Emma closed her laptop. "Then we premiere it ourselves." Jason nodded slowly. "You're thinking live stream?" "Live stream. One night only. Free. Worldwide. Let the world see it before they can bury it." Parker leaned in. "I can get the Guardian to host it. We'll frame it as whistleblowing, as defiance, as art." Olivia folded her arms. "And we get press to cover it. Film critics, culture writers, make it undeniable." Victoria stared at Emma. "You'll never work again." Emma laughed hoarsely. "I wasn't planning on living long enough to care." The next 48 hours were chaos. Every editor Emma had ever helped rallied. An underground post team formed in someone's garage in Hackney. Sophia took leave from the hospital and slept on a couch at the warehouse. Danny drove equipment to late-night ADR sessions. Zoe coded a last-minute captioning system. Jason did press. He called in every favor, did every podcast, faced every tabloid. Not for fame. For Emma. Because Margaret had become real. Because invisibility had become war. Because a woman with 6 months left had finally stepped into the light. Emma watched final cuts from a hospital bed on set. Sophia adjusted her pillows. Parker adjusted the color balance. Ray gave her a silent thumbs up. They finished the cut at 3:14 a.m. on the morning of the live stream. Everyone fell asleep where they stood. That night, they went live. Over 4 million people tuned in. More than watched most studio premieres, the QTD film played without commentary, without interruption, just raw. At the final frame, as Margaret walked into sunlight, a message appeared. For all those who were never seen, Emma had written it alone. No one changed it. Parker, off-screen, whispered, "They'll remember this." Emma nodded. "They'd better." Outside, Universal issued a statement, then another, then went silent, because every move they made only fueled the fire. By the end of the week, 5 other whistleblowers came forward. One named Helen Greaves. She gave a televised interview, cited the film, said she was Margaret, said Emma had told the truth. That truth broke everything open, and Emma, from her hospice room, bed covered in letters from strangers, journalists, survivors, and film students, watched a world shift slightly closer to the one she'd imagined. The climax had come and gone, but the echoes remained. The room was silent. Not just quiet. Silent in the way a world holds its breath. Emma's face glowed in, the reflected light of her laptop screen where emails were piling in. Hundreds, then thousands. Journalists, activists, long-lost colleagues, film lovers, strangers, nurses, carers, cleaners, dreamers. Each email carried the same core message. We see you. We see ourselves. And it was all too much. The success of the live stream had stunned everyone, except Emma. Not because she was arrogant, but because she had always known the story mattered. She just hadn't known if anyone else would listen. Now they were. But her body was failing fast. The painkillers were no longer a luxury. They were an anchor, barely holding her to the present. Jason came to her bedside with a carefully neutral, expression. He sat without speaking. After a long pause, Emma murmured, "They want me to appear on Newsnight." Jason blinked. "You're kidding," she shook her head. "They want a soundbite, a dying woman's last stand, something noble and tragic and tidy." He frowned. "You're not a soundbite." "No," she agreed, but Margaret might be. She turned to him, eyes steady. Let's give them the final chapter, not a TV interview, not a Q&A, a scene. One last scene. Jason's brow furrowed. You mean film something new? Emma nodded. Margaret, 1 year later. Not dead, changed, quietly living. Something that says, truth costs, but survival's possible. Even after the world ends, Jason stood. I'll call Olivia. The new scene was shot in a single evening. Olivia Colman, dressed in soft tones, walked through a London park, a bench, a thermos, a book. She sat, watched the world. A child offered her a daisy. She smiled, took it, tucked it behind her ear. No dialogue, just life. Emma directed from a wheelchair, oxygen line in her nose, blankets over her knees. She whispered to Ray, who adjusted the frame with tear-blurred eyes. When they wrapped, Olivia hugged Emma fiercely and left without a word. Jason wheeled her into the editing bay. I want to cut it myself, Emma said. They spent the night building it, 3 minutes. A final epilogue. They titled it The After. The following week, The After dropped online as an unannounced postscript. It went viral in a different way. No longer a storm, a sunrise. People made art about it, played the music in protests, quoted it in HR meetings. It wasn't loud. It was enduring. In her final days, Emma received a visitor, Helen Greaves. Older now, tired, fierce. They sat together quietly, shared stories, filled in the blanks. At one point, Helen asked, How did you know? Emma smiled faintly. I didn't, but I listened. Sometimes the world leaves echoes. I just wrote them down. Helen pressed a paper into her hand before leaving, an original memo. Sinclair's final statement. Never published. At the top, the invisible ones. Emma cried, not from sadness, from recognition. On the morning of her passing, Emma asked for the lights to be dimmed. Close like a wrap, she told Sophia. Soft fade, her daughter sat beside her. Held her hand. Emma's last words were barely a breath. Tell the next one. Don't wait. Her funeral was held on a quiet Sunday in a garden. Not a church. Jason spoke. Olivia, Ray, even Victoria. Parker read a passage from her screenplay. Sophia scattered her ashes beneath a tree. And someone placed a daisy on the soil. In the months that followed, the film was submitted for the BAFTAs under protest. It won Best Original Screenplay, posthumously. New grant was established, the Winters Fund, to support women over 50 making their first films. Jason stepped away from acting for a year, taught workshops, cited Emma in every speech. Olivia funded a scholarship at the London Film School in Emma's name. Parker published a book, Visible, the story behind The Invisible Ones. It became a bestseller. Helen Greaves testified before Parliament. Agatha Sinclair's story was fully declassified, and a small plaque was mounted in Shoreditch on the old warehouse. Emma Winters. She made stories visible. The world didn't change overnight, but people started looking at the credits, at the gaffers, the caterers, the production assistants, at the invisible ones. And sometimes they saw something more. Something brave. Something bold. Something that said, dreams deferred are not dreams denied. And the camera kept rolling. The wind moved softly through the trees of the community garden where Emma's ashes had been scattered. It had been 3 months since her death. Spring had begun its slow thaw across London, and daffodils burst defiantly through the frost-hardened soil. Sophia stood near the plaque in Shoreditch. She came here often, not just to grieve, but to think. Emma's voice echoed through her mind as if her mother were still directing from just off screen. "Tell the next one. Don't wait." Sophia hadn't waited. She had turned Emma's director's notebook into a foundation's keystone. The Winters Fund was more than a name. It was a workshop, a mentorship hub, and a storytelling incubator. Within weeks of its launch, the submissions flooded in. Scripts from nurses, poems from janitors, a documentary pitch from a 70-year-old grandmother in Manchester who'd been recording her neighbors' lives for years. The world wanted to be seen. Jason had returned to the public eye slowly, not through films, but through interviews, panels, and conversations that moved beyond action hero personas. In one particularly viral clip from the BAFTAs, a young filmmaker asked him, "What did you learn from working with Emma Winters?" Jason paused. "Direction is more than blocking and shots. It's about what you choose to see. She saw everyone. She showed us how to look again." The applause lasted a full minute. Ray Donovan stayed behind the camera, but he never worked without a daisy tucked into his lens cap. When asked, he'd say only, "For the director." Parker's book, Visible, became required reading in multiple film programs, not because it was perfectly written, but because it documented an era, what it meant to make art when time was running out. The last chapter was written in second person, addressed to Emma. It ended, "You did it, not alone, but only you could have started it. The camera's still rolling. We're still watching. Thank you." The film itself became a cultural touchstone, not a blockbuster, not a franchise starter, but a compass. Teachers showed it to students. Organizers projected it on buildings. Companies began funding small internal films, giving voice to janitors, interns, cafeteria workers, not out of pity, out of awe. People saw their own invisibility and were moved to end it. And yet the truest impact was in the quiet places. Woman in Ohio, 62, started writing her memoir. A hospital orderly in Nairobi filmed his co-workers' morning routines. A 58-year-old waitress in Glasgow sent a short film to the Winters Fund, and it was greenlit. Shot in one weekend, streamed in one night, watched by $600,000. At the next BAFTAs, a moment broke the room. The host announced the Winters Fund had launched a global satellite program, then read aloud one of Emma's lines. "The most dangerous lie is the one that says it's too late." There wasn't a dry eye in the house. Sophia visited the set one last time. The warehouse had been cleared out, but the chair remained, Emma's director's chair. No one had moved it. She sat in it, closed her eyes. She could feel her mother's, hand on hers, could hear her say, "What's the next shot?" Sophia smiled and opened her laptop. Months later, a new film premiered under the Winters Fund label. Title: Shift Work. Director: Sophia Winters. Dedicated to Mom. The final line before the credits: "Some lights never go out, they just move behind the camera." The world did not become perfect, but it became more aware, more attuned to what lived in the margins. A whisper grew into a chorus. "We see you." And at every screening, somewhere near the end, the camera lingered a little longer on the hands, the faces, the helpers, the ones who had always been there, the invisible ones. And this time, they stayed in the frame. But even beyond that first year, Emma's legacy expanded in ways none of them could have imagined. Ray began mentoring cinematographers from underrepresented backgrounds, using Emma's name as a silent promise that experience without visibility was still power. In the back of his lens case, he kept her original script, annotated, folded, and read until nearly illegible. One day, during a lecture at the British Film Institute, Ray stood up and said something that surprised even him. "I've worked with directors who changed cinema, but Emma, she changed the audience." Zoe, the bright-haired production coordinator, left her agency job and started her own boutique house, Daisy Chain Productions. Her motto: quiet people, loud films. Their first project? A short about a deaf grandmother who builds a radio station from scraps in rural Yorkshire. Inspired by Emma. Funded by the Winters Fund. It won at Sundance. Jason bought back the rights to 3 of his old films and opened their post-production vaults for indie recuts and experimental edits, offering them to students, artists, and those just breaking into the field. Emma said to give it away, he told the Times, so I'm giving it. He also turned down a sequel that would have paid 8 figures. Instead, he played a secondary role in shift work. Critics called it his best performance. Parker launched a documentary series, Set Shadows. Each episode highlighted an overlooked role in film production, from costume dye specialists to on-set medics. He dedicated episode 1 to Emma. Not a biography, just 10 minutes of silent behind-the-scenes footage overlaid with her most famous quote, "We build worlds, then disappear. But the world remembers." Sophia became a public speaker almost by accident, booked first by accident, then by demand. Her TED Talk, How to Grieve Forward, garnered 3 million views in 3 weeks. She never stopped nursing. But now, she trained new nurses in narrative care, how to let patients speak their stories, how to hear the poetry in pain. On her desk in the training hall sat Emma's leather notebook. Open, always. And as for the film itself, The Invisible. Once, it was preserved in the British Library, added to the UNESCO Memory of the World Register, and included in the national curriculum for A-level media studies. But none of that meant as much as the emails Sophia still received. I saw myself. I started writing again. My mum never got to say what she felt. But I will. And the most recent one, I watched it with my daughter. She said she wants to be like Emma when she grows up. Sophia printed that one, kept it in her coat pocket. One final act remained, a private ceremony. No cameras, no press. Sophia stood alone at a beach Emma had loved as a girl. Waves crashed with theatrical flair, seagulls heckling the wind. She opened a small wooden box. Inside, Emma's last page, a handwritten addition to her script. Margaret, now elderly, stands in a crowd of people. She looks out, watches them move, smile, work, argue, dance. She doesn't say anything. She just looks, and the voiceover reads, "I thought I needed them to see me. But really, I just needed to see them." Sophia placed the page in a small bottle, sealed it, and tossed it into the sea. Somewhere, far away, a child might find that bottle. And maybe, just maybe, a new story would begin. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.